Sounds like some people can hear me. I hope you can all hear and see me and that everything's all lined up and everything. Let me know if it is or isn't in the comments. I still don't quite understand why YouTube doesn't let me see what I should be seeing, but so I'm kind of running blind, but I can see all your chats. Hi Andrew and Jason and Jean. Thanks for joining. And whoever else may be out there. And yeah, it's a very stormy night here in Belfast. It's like probably low 30s and kind of sleeting heavily outside. Kind of gross. But it's nice and warm inside. Got some tunes to play. I hope you're all doing well. If you haven't been to one of these before, welcome. These are usually a lot of fun. I love hearing what everybody's been working on. So if you got questions or thoughts about music, I love to hear about them in the chat. And you know, if you have requests, Andrew's got a request in for the Blackbird hornpipe. I'm happy to throw that one out there. But you know, if you have things you want to hear or questions about playing mandolin or music in general, I love hearing people's thoughts. So don't be bashful. Jump right in. All right, sounds good in Alaska. Glad to hear it. All the way over there. Yeah, I'll play a little bit of a Blackbird hornpipe and see if some questions roll in here. How does it go? Oh, there it is. I'll play it, and then I'll play another tune. We'll see what happens. was Blackbird hornpipe and a little bit of the Virginia. Andrew asked a great question. He also says, first song you ever heard on the mandolin. Fell in love immediately. That's a good one to hear. Where did you hear it? I'm curious about that. Andrew asked, what characterizes a hornpipe in terms of playing style? So, great question, and actually playing that tune that way sort of hides the answer. So hornpipe is a style of dance that I don't know a whole lot about, but there's kind of hornpipes in a couple different dance traditions. But in Irish music, you'll often hear it with the music anyway, as having this kind of lilt to it. A really classic hornpipe is the one that goes like this that I can't remember the name of. Still can't think of the name, but it's on my website somewhere. And it's so what it has that really kind of, so rather than playing really flat like that, it's got this real kind of pulse to it. And so there's a couple. So the way that I learned that tune, Blackbird hornpipe, is really kind of flattened out, so it sounds a little bit more like a reel. And I learned it from the playing of Quiveen O'Reilly and Mick O'Brien, both great Irish musicians. Quiveen is an awesome fiddle player. Mick is a great piper. They have a couple amazing duo albums. I can try to point you in their direction. It's hard to spell. If you look up Mick O'Brien pipes, I bet you'll be able to pull it up, but Quiveen has a crazily spelled name. Harvest Home, thank you, Nelson, for putting that tune name out there for me. So yeah, I play that tune kind of flattened out. I guess you could turn it into more of a classic hornpipe by versus it really smooths it out that way, which is how I heard the tune, so that's how I play it. But I'm sure if it's actually a hornpipe, then it can be played with that nice lilting style as well. Another tune that often gets flattened out is Fisher's hornpipe, especially in bluegrass circles. You often hear Fisher's hornpipe kind of nice and straight line, kind of laser beam sound. But being a hornpipe, Fisher's hornpipe can also be played etc. So that's sort of the deal with hornpipes. Continuing on, Nelson asked, would you play L&N rag at a medium pace but with the ornamentation thrown in? I've been working on it, but getting that F chord in there is always rough sounding. I know what you mean. That playing in C and getting an F chord double stop is always a little awkward, and it's sort of just taken me years of just kind of jumping for it and hoping I'm landing it. It doesn't always work, but the more you do it, the better you get. So yeah, I'll play a little bit of L&N rag. So right there, that F chord I'm using is 2nd fret on the G, 3rd fret on the D, and 3rd fret on the A, and that 3rd fret on the A is the melody. So again, it's another F chord that I'll use. 5-3 open. And then B part. That's that same 2-3-3. 5-3 open. That's an E chord 6-2 open on the D, A, and E. So those are a couple of the double stops that I throw in from time to time. Great question. The F chord in C is always a little tricky, a little kind of awkward to throw in, at least for me. But stick with it, keep trying to throw it in there, and it'll always get a little smoother every time. Hello from Dagonia Springs. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Lewis and Dempsey. Cool. Andrew says, got a Mando, the Basic Fiddler's Philharmonic Fiddle Tunes book. Cool. I don't know that book, but I'll look it up. Lewis says, I've been expanding my horizon and attending some Irish sessions. Do you have any sets you like to hear? Not in particular. I love hearing how people put tunes together. Awesome that you're going to Irish sessions. They're great fun, and the more you go, the more tunes you'll learn, and the more tunes that'll start to sound familiar. I love just kind of the classic, all the Irish tunes that I have on the website are my favorite Irish tunes, and I've got some lessons on my website on how to put sets together. I'm a little unreliable when it comes to putting sets together, especially I don't often remember what I put with another tune, and sometimes in a session I'll just be playing and think I'm going to go into another tune and go, oh, another tune, and then just totally don't have anything pop out of my fingers, and it's like, oh, okay, just kidding, I guess that was the end. But I don't know, I kind of go both ways with sets. Like in terms of the feeling, I love it when the maybe there's a key change, maybe it goes from like D to A, and it really ramps up the energy and things are feeling really energetic. I love that. But I also love just kind of a nice little change that maybe stays within the key, which sort of just gives it a little bit of like, oh, this is something new and refreshing. It's kind of nice. I wouldn't want to have just one or the other. So just sort of a nice set that sort of changes the feel, whether it's ramping up the energy or just kind of giving things a little turn to make things fresh again. Jason says, let's see if I can ask this clearly. When you play the triplets, are you hitting both strings, down, up, down, or single string, down, next string, down, and then up for the third note? So I play triplets a couple different, again, unreliably. Unreliable is my middle name tonight. So when I play triplets, let's see, gotta get a jig in my head. So there's the tune, the Jig of Slurs. I think it's on my website. It's a great one for practicing triplets because you have this, almost all the A parts on the first many phrases of the A part is just on the A string. A lot of times I will play up, down, up. So if I'm playing through this tune, down, and then the triplet is up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So that's the triplet. But you can also play them down, up, down. And it doesn't really matter one way or the other. I think it's nice to try them both. I think what you'll do is, as you play more triplets, you'll fall into one that feels more natural than the other. which is totally fine. You know, I play up, down, up. A lot of my friends play down, up, down. Some other friends play up, down, up. Just experiment with it, see how it falls. Sometimes one will be easier than the other, just depending on what came before and what's coming after. Great question, though, and ultimately, whatever feels best. And yes, hitting both. I am kind of going through. I always think I never think of the two sets of the two strings in a course as two different strings. I always just think of them as one big string. I hope that helps answer that part of the question. I hope that was your question. Andrew says, do you remember the first song you played today? Oh, okay. The first tune that oh wait, what did I play first? Oh, that's a good question. Oh yeah, it's a tune. It's called Lucy Farr's Jig. It's a tune that I learned from my friend, who's a great Irish fiddle player. I don't think it's on my website. I'm kind of quite sure it's not, but I'll just look real quick. Yeah, I really like that tune. I don't know how that popped out of my fingers. I haven't thought about it in a long time. Nope, not on my website. What you gonna do? It's on, I think, let me check this. It might be on my my band's album. If you're trying to find a recording of it, it might be on this album. Let's find out. Yeah, okay, so it's on. I don't think I can post a. Let's see, can I? Oh, nice. So I just put a link in the chat. It's on my band Velocipede's second album. It's track 12. I do that into another lovely tune, The Lonesome Jig, also known as The Rolling Waves. But you can stream that online and listen to it there if you want to remember how it goes. And I'm sure there's tabs and stuff for it out there on the internet somewhere. Yeah, Lewis says different etiquette. I'm assuming you mean like jam etiquette from bluegrass. Yeah, it's a different world. It's and also it can really vary session to session. You know, with an Irish session, I've been to some Irish sessions that are a little bit uptight, or at least seemingly to me, and some sessions that are really loose and fun. I tend to prefer the ones that don't get too serious, but it's kind of it's nice to have the variety too. You know, I don't like anything that's super exclusive, but it's also nice to really have people, you know, focused in and kind of really aiming to have a nice focused melodic sound and not too much kind of noodling and stuff and no like harmonies and breaks and stuff. But yeah, you know, to each their own. It's kind of up to the person running the session to sort of try to figure out how to get everybody involved, but also kind of stick to the tradition. Oh, cool. Jason says McNabb's hornpipe is full of triplets, and he wants to tackle that one next. I don't know that tune. I'll have to look it up. Cool. Great question so far. I love thinking about all this stuff. I want to make sure I'm not I don't think I've missed anything yet, but if I have, just post it again, and I'll jump on it. Let's see, another tune here. See, I just did I sat down and recorded hours and hours of lessons today in front of the camera, so I'm all lined up. I always have to do a bunch getting ready for the summer because I'm gone for a lot of fiddle camps, and this year I'm going to be I'm actually going to Ireland in May for a big chunk of May, so I have to do all my kind of summer lessons now, so I'm getting them all lined up and in the queue. But maybe I'll play something from whatever I made for lessons today. I'll just remind myself here with a little look back into the there's a great tune. So I recently put out a lesson on kind of replacing octave notes. It's a little bit of like a melodic variation thing. I put it out, I think, last week or maybe the week before. I can't remember. But I used the tune Miss Monaghan's as an example. And then somebody pointed out that I hadn't actually taught the tune Miss Monaghan's, which I was like, go find it on my website, Miss Monaghan's. And I had never made a lesson for it. So I'll play that tune because I just made a lesson for it, and it'll be up shortly. So there was Miss Monaghan's, and then I was thinking about a question about sets, and that's a tune. That's a nice little set that I like. Lewis's question about sets. Yeah, I like it's that sort of brought up a couple things. That was an example of a set that went from the key of D to the key of A, and it kind of brings up the energy. It goes from a fairly notey tune to an extremely notey tune, which always helps too. But I think what helps me there, and when it comes to making sets, something that's nice, and that second tune is an example of this. It's nice to have a tune that kind of plays nicely with other tunes. So that tune you can kind of, I think of that tune as a tune that if you're in the key of D, playing an Irish reel, pretty safely you can just bust into that tune. What Miss Thornton? No, not Miss Thornton's. What is that tune? Irish tune in the key of A. Can't remember what it's called. I'm gonna go look it up on my website. Unless somebody can beat me to it. Or if my brain beats me to it. Sometimes all it takes is just trying to look up the tune and it comes out. Pretty sure it's on my website though. Uh-oh. John Stenson's. There it is, not Miss Thornton's. John Stenson's great A tune, and I really think that's a tune that can really kind of get thrown on the end. It's nice, energetic, somewhat well known, so often there's going to be people to join in and make it create a lot of energy. But yeah, I think it's nice to have just a couple tunes that just work well. It's like, I don't know, what is it, A positive blood that you can give to anybody else. It really just finding some tunes that will just kind of go, and you can start reliably. That's kind of half the battle, is finding a tune that really can work well with other tunes, but also really it's not going to be a tune that you're going to be like, oh, how does that go? It's just a tune that easily comes out of your fingers, and that's different for everybody. Dempsey asks, can you play Carroll County Blues? Not off the top of my head. It's been a long time. I can't even quite remember how it goes right now. I know I've played along with it and I've heard it on records, but it's not one at the tips of my fingers. Andrew says, I have a hard time finding suitable double stops when I'm playing a song that's predominantly on the E string. I kind of get stuck on E, like Fly Around My Pretty Little Miss and Chinkapin Hunting, the A major version. Okay, so that's great. I'll use both of those examples. Bit of a fly around, and so yeah, on the A part of that, what I try to do is just leave that D on the A string with my third finger, 5th fret, leave that down. So you get that a lot. Because D is a nice... I mean, you could play it with the open A as well. In the key of D, that open A string is a totally fine string to drone on, but you can also bring that A up to D. And then you've got that low D as well, so you can kind of play that whole octave. D, D, and then melody. And then in the B part, I'm using that open A string as a drone. And then when it goes up to the B, you can do a couple things. You can add a low B for an octave. So a B on the A string, so you have 2 and 7. Or you can add 5 and 7, which keeps that, kind of turns it into a G chord. So ultimately, a lot of the time what I'm doing is either playing an open A or trying to get a 5th fret in there on your A string to play with whatever's happening on the E string. And in the key of A, Chicken Been Hunting, I'll play it and then think about it. Great tune. Yeah, so I'll go through the parts a little bit. In the A part, I'm really just kind of droning that open A string. And then when I go down the A string, I drone the E string above. Something else I was finding myself doing there, is you can just throw in a little bit of kind of like an A power chord. 2-2 open open. And that just gives a little extra punch. And then in the B part, that's all open A string drone. And then when we get to that second fret on the E string, it's an F sharp, so it's part of a D chord. You can play D, A, open A, and then that F sharp, and you get a nice D chord ringing out. The same thing, D chord here. Get that nice E chord, 6th fret on the D, 2nd on the A. And then a lot of A string open drone. D chord, E chord, D. So that's a little bit of what I do in those two tunes. I think it's really what's going on in my head is thinking about what the chords are, and I think we've talked about this. Just kind of thinking what the chords are that are happening underneath it, and if it's if you're in the key of A, yeah, so you're right on there with making chord shapes farther up the frame. Ooh, wow, I got something in my eye here. I think it's gone. A couple chord shapes farther up the fingerboard. You can think about it that way, or you can really just think about it as that note. Even with, like in Fly Around My Pretty Little Miss, you can think about that as a chord shape up here, or you can think about it as just having that D. You're in the key of D, and you're just trying to hold that D on the A string as long as possible. And sometimes it can become a little bit of like finger acrobatics of like, okay, I know I want to keep that D string down, or sorry, that D on the A string. So do I shift up? Do I do third finger and pinky to get that, or do I do... You can do a little bar. I think ultimately, I think you're right that knowing different chord shapes and inversions can help you get a little more comfortable with double stops. So when I think about this double stop, so in Flyer on My Pretty Little Miss, if we were to take that down to play it in G, just bring it down a string. And when I'm doing that double stop, I'm really thinking about that as like the middle of a G chop chord. 7, 5, 2, 3. And I'm just taking that 5 and 2. And likewise, going back to D, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but sometimes I'll play this full shape. This is a chord shape that I don't ever play I never really use this chord shape when I'm playing chords, but it's essentially the D chord, and then you can move it up, E, F sharp, G. But it's a nice, sometimes it comes in handy when you've got that. It becomes 7, 5, 5, 7 is a big G chord. And I use that in Billy and the Lowground too sometimes, in the key of C. It's in the B section. Right there, so I've got a big C chord. It's a open, 2, 3, 3. And that's an F chord, and I've got 5, 3, 3, 5. Yeah, I do. Andrea asked, are you getting that D and A with your second finger? I do a lot of, getting it. You can do it a couple ways. You can think of it more as like a bar, where you're kind of barring flat across. What I find is, if I kind of aim for the space between the two sets of strings, I can get it with one finger. And sometimes I don't even get both strings, like right there. I'm not actually getting this low D string, the D string closer to my head, but I'm muting it anyway. And then the other one is ringing. So, is the one closest to my head, and I'm actually getting that note out of the one closest to the floor. But in the context of the chord, you don't notice it. And it just takes a little bit of kind of figuring out how to get your finger in there in a way. Mostly just use your ear, like figure out what's comfortable for your hand, but then also just use your ears. And if you're hearing like the split, or you're getting a really bad mute or buzzy sound, then you can readjust your finger or try a more of like a bar straight across. But yeah, I end up doing a lot of that. Kind of two sets of strings under one finger. And because mandolin was my first instrument, I now do that on guitar too, which is a little strange and kind of confuses people that watch me play guitar. But so I don't, it's not necessarily like a must-do technique, but it can be helpful. Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting. So Andrew said, helpful to hear you say that not getting the whole string is okay. Yeah, ultimately, like, my main kind of focus is that if it sounds good, it is good, even if I'm not getting both strings to really ring out in all their toneful glory. Because, you just don't, once you get 7 other strings ringing, it's not going to matter that one's muted. It'll matter if you're really splitting the strings and getting, if if I do this, that's a bad sound, or even worse. So like, you hear that something's going on in there. So getting it to a place where it's either ringing out or just muted. Yeah, don't if don't worry about really getting everything under your fingers, as long as you can get that note muted, and it can be the higher string as well, the one closer to the floor of the 4 strings that you're muting. Yeah, our fingers are only so wide. But yeah, don't be afraid to kind of move your hand around a little bit, and as long as you stay comfortable, see what you can see where you can sneak in fingers and find places to get more strings covered with one finger, or to keep a string fretted to get more double stops going on. And you might have to kind of break that rule of 2 frets per finger. If you play a scale. You might have to kind of, sometimes I'll do, like, if I have a double stop on 5 and 2, 5 on the A string, 2 on the E, sometimes I'll sneak my pinky in on the 5th fret of the E string. Or you can just roll your ring finger over. Take your pick. So don't be afraid to break the rules, as long as you've got those good fundamentals down and you're not accidentally sort of creating some bad habits. I find myself breaking that rule a lot, the 2 frets per finger rule, a lot in tunes in C. If I'm playing Tennessee Mountain Fox Chase, a lot of tunes where it's like open 3s and 5s, a lot of times I'll slide up to, rather than using, if you're like quote unquote following the rules, you've got 5s and 3s under your ring and your middle and ring finger. But a lot of times I'll kind of get into a half position, pointer finger on the 3rd fret, middle finger on the 5th, because I can grab some double stops. Whereas, you can grab some of these double stops too, if like pinky on the 7th fret of the A string and middle finger on the 3rd fret of the E string. You can do it, or I can do it, but it's not particularly comfortable. It's a little bit too much of a stretch for me to feel super good about. And maybe if I stuck with it, it'd become a little more comfortable. But a lot of times, rather than using, if I'm going 5 on the A string to 7 on the A string with the 3rd fret on the E string above that, you kind of get this sound. And you can do that with these 3 fingers and leave your pointer finger out of it, which is sort of the right way if you're thinking of like where your fingers normally should go. But it's a lot more comfortable for me. And my hammer-ons and pull-offs sound more natural because those are just stronger fingers. Again, I could work with my pinky and get it up to a better place. And I do try to do that every once in a while. But if there's something that's really uncomfortable for you, don't be afraid to break the rules. Andrew's got another good question. In terms of key changes in songs or between songs, are there rules, or do you have guidance about key progression? Or is that in the building sets lesson? It is in the building sets lesson a little bit, but I'll go over it here. Ultimately, no rules. If you play a tune and then you play another tune and you like the way that the first tune goes into the second tune, awesome. There's nothing that says you can't do that. There's a couple things that I use just as kind of rough guidelines to help me find sets that will probably sound good together. If I start a set of tunes in an Irish session, and I start a tune in the key of G, and then I'm like, okay, I want to do another tune, and I'm playing through the tune, and I'm like, what am I going to go into? What am I going to go into? A lot of times what I'll do is it'll often sound good if the next tune in the set is in the key of D, because you're just sort of moving up a fifth. You can also think about G string, D string, A string. It just kind of ramps up the energy somehow a little bit. It's adding a sharp to the key signature. You can think about it that way. I had I taught a music theory workshop at a music camp once that was sort of like any experience level, come and we'll figure out something to talk about with a little bit of music theory and how you can practically add that to your instrument. And the only people that showed up, there were 3 professional level Cape Breton piano players that showed up to my music theory lesson, and piano players know a lot more about music theory than I do. So it ended up just being this kind of round robin of oh, what do you like when you change tunes? And one of them said, another thing you can think about that sort of will make a tune set sound good. I mean, also sometimes if you go too far, if you go to from G to E, it's this huge jump of keys. You're not going G to D to A to E, which would be a slow ramp up in energy because you're adding sharps every time. If you go G to E, it can just be a little too whoa, there's no connection anymore. One of the piano players in this workshop said, one thing you can do is stay in the same key but make it minor. So if you're in or you could, if you're minor, you could go major. So maybe you're going A minor into A major. It's still an A, but you've just changed whether it's minor or major, or you could go minor to Dorian or major to Mixolydian. Play around, change something within the key, but stay in the same kind of tonal base, or move one step up or down the circle of fifths, which is G to A to E, or G to C. In general, if you move up, so you're going G to D, you're going to ramp up the energy. So here's an example of I'll try to do something that changes key and doesn't really work as well. Let's see. I'll just kind of pull something out here. So here actually, I'll just do an example that's going to be super weird. Another change that's good. So in general, I try to just ramp up the energy. As the set goes along, it's rare that I really want to make things really mellow in the middle. So something you can do that doesn't happen so much in at least traditional Irish music is you don't tend to change time signatures, but if you go from a jig to a reel, you get a real boost in energy. No pun intended. So, if you're going... that really brings things up. But if you go in the other direction, so I'll do a tune set that changes from the key of D as a reel to the key of G as a jig, and it's going to be weird. I'll see if I probably can do this. I'll just pick 2 tunes that I can start pretty consistently here. real drop in energy. Part of that is because you're going real to jig, which kind of slows down the number of notes that are going by per second, and part of it is going from D to G, which just kind of has a mellowing effect. But try things out. Sometimes I do go D to G, and it works great, and it really can. If it's the right G tune that's peppy enough, you can really keep the energy up. But try things out. There's some tunes that I never thought would work as a good set. There's the one set that I do in my band where we go from F to D, which is just a very weird change, but I think it works nicely. And for some reason it works. I don't know why. It worked for the particular set. So try everything. Don't rule anything out based on theory or anything. But also kind of look for patterns and see to my ear, and again it's personal preference. To my ear, going from D to A is going to ramp up the energy and be a more reliably kind of good sounding set. All right, Gail has joined us from Montana. Thanks for jumping in. It's got a great question. What are 3 or 4 skills that a ranked beginner should focus on? Okay, just a quick answer to Andrew's question who asked, what tunes were those? I don't think either one's on my website. The first tune is The Field in the Forest. It's a tune by this great band Crowfoot, and the composer is Adam Broom. But the tune is called The Field in the Forest. And the second tune is Maison de Glace, which is another recently composed tune from Quebec. I'm blanking on the name of the composer right now. Both nice tunes, and I'm sure you can find them somewhere online. They're not on my website, but they're out there somewhere. So great question from Gail. What are 3 or 4 skills a ranked beginner should focus on? I think the first skill, regardless of what your skill level is just having fun on the instrument. Playing music, whatever the instrument is all about, whether it's singing or playing a mandolin or a guitar or fiddle or drums. It's just having fun. If you can have fun playing the instrument, you're going to spend more time with it in your hands, and the time that you do spend with it is just going to fly by. It's the old saying, time flies when you're having fun. If you're having fun playing mandolin, it's going to be a lot more enjoyable, and you're going to get a lot better because an hour is going to go by like that. Whereas if you feel like someone should say, like, oh, I really am told I should play scales, and you practice your scales diligently, but it's not very fun, that hour is just going to crawl by, and you're not going to be very inspired in that time. But so I think, number one, have fun. And I think for me, having fun is playing tunes rather than playing scales. There's definitely benefits to playing scales, but a lot of those benefits you can also find in playing tunes. Tunes are just sort of collections of little bits of scale and little bits of arpeggio and all these little things that you can explain through other exercises, but tunes just sound good on their own. So, I'd say if you're a ranked beginner, go through the beginner series on my website, and then also once you get through that, just go right to the beginner tunes and listen to them, see which ones really call out to you, and learn those. I think that kind of leads me to another skill that's a harder one to sort of kind of quantify, but if you can figure out what it is that excites you, or just identify like, oh, this is a tune that I like. Oh, I don't like that tune as much. Focusing on the tunes that you like is going to sort of give you that drive. You're going to be more likely to spend the time on a tune to really work towards getting a tune under your fingers that you like the sound of, versus some random tune that someone said you should know that doesn't really call to you. It's going to make the time fly by if you're into it, and it's going to make the time drag by if you're doing it under some sense of obligation. Another skill maybe is just developing a good tone on the instrument, playing nice and slow and getting a nice, beautiful sound out of the instrument. Where you've got a nice tone coming out of the instrument, you've got a nice rhythmic feel, versus, kind of not focusing on those parts and getting a tone that's more of like a... right there, it's just like between where my hand is over the strings, kind of the angle of the pick, my rhythmic consistency, all of that stuff can lead, is the difference between and one of those is a lot more pleasing to play and listen to, and the other is less pleasing to play and listen to. So if you can get a good sound out of your instrument that you personally are happy with, and that is a very subjective thing, I found that learning a new instrument, if I can get to the place where I just like the sound, it doesn't matter if I'm doing crazy stuff on the instrument, because I can just hit a note and be like, oh, that's a nice note. And, oh, that's another nice note. Whereas if all your notes are coming out kind of thin and tinny and your rhythm isn't that good, it's going to be a less enjoyable experience. I'll say one more. I could kind of do this all night, but one more is, as soon as possible, try to get a friend or a group of friends or join a jam. It's an intimidating thing to do, but get out there and play with other people, because again, it makes the time fly by. Music is meant to be shared. If music is, if you're having fun playing by yourself, that the amount of fun you have just triples or quadruples or times 10 when you go and start actually playing with other people. You learn from each other. So find somebody that's at the same level as you, or a little better or a little worse. You don't need to be perfectly matched up. If the other person's better than you, you're going to be in a little bit over your head, and just, that's totally fine to be kind of behind the curve. It just means you're going to be learning a little faster and you're going to be working a little harder. But it's all good, and just finding a nice patient person to play with, find a nice supportive community to play music with. And if you're a little ahead of the other person, what that's going to do is that's going to give you the opportunity to teach. You're going to be a teacher, and I think half of my musical skill has come from just teaching for as many years as I have. I've done a lot of teaching, and it's every time I do one of these, or I teach I make a lesson, or I teach someone in person, I always learn something, and putting yourself in that situation is a huge part. So, get out there and play music with other people. All right. Chris says hello from snowy Buffalo. Hello from rainy Maine. Sorry, we're about up here. I got to wrap things up and eat a little bit of dinner. But I'll answer a couple more questions here, just the last few that are up here. Rosemary says, how do you keep that good tone up while you're playing fast? Incrementally, I would say. It's hard to get a good tone when playing fast. It's kind of one of the laws of playing music. The faster you go, the less time and energy there is to focus on getting a good tone. So I think watch my video on my technique and fundamentals page on how to play faster. I talk about getting to a place where you can find like, oh, I've got this tune, Whiskey Before Breakfast, at this speed, and I can make it sound good and get a good tone and be nice and rhythmic. And then you say, okay, but then I speed it up a little. And things start to fall apart. Just make a note of that and be like, okay, I can play it. You can pull out a metronome, say, okay, I've got this at 90 beats per minute, and I bump it up to 95 or 100, and I'm really starting to struggle. And just work incrementally, you know, add 2 beats per minute to the metronome and play it there a couple times. Also, slowing it way down. I've learned a lot from making the slow versions of the play-along tracks, having a metronome in my ear and having to really adhere to that metronome. I think a metronome is a big part of getting a good tone because it gives you the beat, and if you use a metronome on a really slow setting, you really it's a tough critic, but it doesn't lie, and it'll really get you in a good place to just get a good sound out of the instrument. And if you can play Whiskey Before Breakfast uncomfortably slow, it's going to give you a better tone when you want to play it fast. So if you can play... Because when there's, you know, when your beat is like click, click, there's this cavern, this huge cavern of space that, you know, you're trying to hit note, note, and there's all this space in the middle to like, oh, hit a little early, or ooh, hit a little late, and your sense of time starts to go. And as you play slow and you start to develop that ability to play slow, it really helps your tone even when you start speeding up again. All right, a couple more things. Gail says, love the Brainjo site you recommended a while ago. Yeah, me too. I'm glad you're enjoying that. That's how I learned to play clawhammer banjo. That guy is totally brilliant. He's got some great resources. If you have any interest in banjo or just the articles on like learning how to learn, and his thoughts on music. He's a musician and a neuroscientist, and he's just got great insight into learning and playing music, and it's really, really good stuff. Cool. Thank you all so much for joining in. It's another good hour. If you want to come back to this at any point, I'll post the archive link pretty soon here. And yeah, have a great rest of the month. I'm going to do next month's office hours it's going to be like the first week because I'm going to Ireland in the second half of the month. So at this point, I'll post a link to it, but it should be the 7th. May 7th. It's another Monday in the evening. I hope to see you all there. And yeah, this is super fun. Great questions. Thanks you all for joining. And yeah, have a good evening and a good rest of the month. And thank you all so much for your support. Couldn't do it without you. And all right, I'm going to figure out how to turn this thing off. I'm always, oops. Well, I might have just closed it, but if I didn't, I'm closing it now. Thank you all so much. See you next time. Bye.